Ask your most trusted advisor, one whose only iron in the fire is genuine concern for you, your team, and your organization. And she may not know this, but she is someone else that I would call for that same kind of advice. And so I'm grateful to have her in my trusted advisor network.
Dr. McKenna, what are you thinking about today as a leader?
Sabbath, thank you for asking. So one of the things I was thinking about recently was I was facing a decision with team members, leaders who surround me. And it was a place where I had certain convictions. And I got to tell you, the majority of my team members had different convictions. And and so I was like, so what do you do? So what I did was I reached out to my older brother, who has been just a critical mentor of mine, a really important mentoring voice. My brother has had experience. He kind of walked the path of developing leaders before I did. I said, how do you know when to follow your gut versus listening to the gut of others? And and I think this is something I certainly would have my answer for someone who asked me that, but I needed his advice in real time. So I explained it to him. I said, so give me a quote. Like, what would you say to a person who asks you that question? Because I got a lot of leaders, if they get real, like they're going to ask that question. And he said, here's what he said. He said, ask your most trusted advisor, one whose only iron in the fire is genuine concern for you, your team, and your organization.
Mm.
And he went on to say something about that this is someone that will not pull any punches. This is someone that's also going to be very straight up and truthful with you. Um, and it's funny because he was that person. I know that he will not fluff me up in any way. So he's going to tell me exactly what he thinks. Um, I'm not sure it told me what to do, but it told me something about who I need to continue to ask.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually our guest today, and she may not know this, but she is someone else that I would call for that same kind of advice. And so I'm grateful to have her in my trusted advisor network.
I love that. Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation today as well. So let's get this wild conversation going. Welcome to the Wild Conversation, where human being and human doing converge, reshaping the world of leadership, culture, and performance. Today, we get to have a wild conversation with Tami Heim. She's been the president and CEO of Christian Leadership Alliance since January 2012. Her professional career includes executive leadership experience in technology, marketing, publishing, and retail. She served as a partner in the A Group brand development, executive vice president, and chief publishing officer of Thomas Nelson Publishers, and as the president of Borders, Inc. So she has had a deep expertise in the publishing and media distribution space, but most importantly, we know Tami as a person full of thoughtfulness, leadership clarity, and she's a real deal and a longtime friend of the Wild Leaders team and community. Tami, thank you for being with us today.
Oh, it is great to be with you two today. I've really looked forward to this time. Thank you for hosting me, having me here.
We're excited for this conversation. We are going to start with a quick round of wild cards. I believe you're familiar with this. We didn't prep you for it,
No,
but
you
we
did
have
it.
we have a deck of 50 cards, each with this different question that's developmentally focused. We love having this opportunity to dive deep really quickly anytime we're in a group of leaders. I pulled out 10. So I'll go first. You can go next. Temi and Rob will round us out. We'll just pick a number between 1 and 10, and I'll pull that card for you. We'll answer from our gut. It really could be like a one sentence answer, or you could dive deep if you wanted to, but no pressure. So I will choose number 2. And it is, what has allowed you to survive well during a tough day this last week? I'm going to say staying hydrated. We did have a little conversation about this, Tami, before we got started, but I've been getting really intentional about my water intake, and I really think it helps me to think clearer, and just like if there's anything at the bottom shelf level that I can do to survive well, it's stay hydrated. So that is
I
my
love
answer
that. Now
to
I'm
that.
inspired to go get my water bottle. Thank you for that. Great.
Okay,
I
Tammy.
think I'm going to pick 7.
Okay. How would your perspective be different if you believed others could change?
That's such a good question. And I'm just thinking, I'm processing it because, most of my life is going to where people are and meeting them there and
Mm,
bringing them along. And so maybe if I thought they could, I would be more eager to jump into that. I
mm,
think knowing that being able to work with someone could really significantly change their thinking behavior and their development of a person. And we always like to spend time with people that are quick, and that they can get things going. And then you get to watch them take off and sail and do
Mm,
really well. So I think if I believed that, I would jump in even faster.
mm.
that's good. Thank you.
Well said.
Yeah.
Number
Dr.
8.
McKenna. All right.
It's been my favorite number since 3rd grade. So
Well, there we go.
I don't know
All
why.
right. Number 8. What do others need from you that will require you to stretch yourself?
Decisiveness.
It's good.
I'm going to leave it at that.
All right. We know there's a story behind that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good.
Wow. Thank you, Sabbath. That is just
Yeah.
those questions, Tammy. We didn't warm you up for that.
No, but I mean, they're good. They're
Yeah.
thoughtful questions.
It's they are a tremendous way, we have a methodology for getting people into the shallow end before the deep end, and because we know that vulnerability and truth and all honesty as a part of trust are so critical. So those cards have been an incredible way to just get people into the very, very shallow end before they sort of enter into some deeper conversation. So, and it's not that shallow, right? But
Yeah.
it's a start.
No,
So
and I think they're wonderful. I mean, we have that habit in our home. We have table cards.
yeah,
So
it's
whatever it
yes,
is, we're always doing table cards at the table just to get the conversation going versus how was your day?
right.
We jump
Yeah.
into that. No, so I love that. Well done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, but I am curious. So, I get that free advice from my brother, and now I'm looking for some free advice from my friend Tami Heim. I'm kind of curious, just before we even get into some other questions about you, is like, how would you answer my question to my brother? If you had leaders out there, because I bet a lot of people are asking this question, how do you know when to trust your gut versus trusting the gut of other people that you trust, especially when they may differ?
That is a really good question, especially in the context of trust. And I think about that because I'm wired, I'm much more heavy on the intuitive side. And at one point, I had a mentor that said, Tammy, you need to lean into that. I mean, you have
Mm,
great instincts and that you've done that. But
mm,
there's an interesting thing in what I have experienced lately is the danger of being unconsciously competent.
mhm,
All right. And you know what that is? That's just like, hey, I've done this. I know how to do it. You see a situation, you can dive right in, you can bring order to it. It's like it clicks so fast. And I think sometimes that builds your instinct. And what I've really been trying to practice is when I feel that action, and by the way, I am an activator. When I feel that, I really temper and pull myself back. And I say, I just want to surrender this for a moment,
mm,
and just because I may have done it in the past or I really know how to do it, is that really going to be the best outcome?
mm,
And I think it's that pause. And then there's other times, and I've always been really open. I love it when somebody has an idea, or if I throw out an idea and then someone comes in and they change it and they build on it and it doesn't even look like my original idea, but I know it's just going to be so much greater. Just finding that way to just trust and, to lean in and say, okay, so what are you thinking about that and why you want to go that way? But I think that tendency for us to immediately go with the gut, or where you've run the race, where the turns are, that that's really the time you need to step back and say, but I really need to think more deeply and more critically about, is
Yeah.
that really going to be the best solution for now? So
Yeah.
your
It-
own competency can sometimes be your greatest danger.
yeah. And it caused me to think, I know one of the cards in that deck also is regarding that, what would be different if you stepped back and took a pause for a moment? And another question in there is, whether or not you're leveraging your past experiences
Mhm.
going forward. And I think one of the things that you know how it is when you get to be a certain age, you not only saw things come back around, but you saw them come back around again,
Mhm.
like bell bottoms. Like it's
Yes.
actually they're back again. Like
I
in
know, and
some
I'm happy
circles.
for that. I
And
love that.
yeah,
Yes.
and it's
Celebrates those great years when they were
yeah.
popular a long time ago.
And I think, and it's funny when you've been through something and you've seen it not work. And then when it comes up again, is like, is your gut right that what didn't work before is not going to work again? Or is it shifted a little bit? I even face that sometimes, if that makes any sense about these convictions, like about key decisions where I've been there on a team before where we made that same decision and I didn't wasn't a great outcome. And so learning from it is that going with your gut, even if other people may not have been through that in the past.
Well, you
Uh,
just said the magic phrase. You said learning from it.
yeah.
Yeah, we had did some pretty extensive research with Azusa Pacific University on what does it take for a leader to thrive.
Mm,
And we found that, the results were pretty interesting because they were not unique by gender or generation or ethnicity. But what we found is sometimes with younger leaders, there are places that they get derailed that keeps them from thriving. And it was the whole idea of being so focused on a goal that that's all you focus on. And what they found is sometimes younger leaders will miss the goal and cannot recover from it, cannot learn,
mm,
can't even process it, and they don't know how to fail forward. And then by the same token, people get so obsessed on the goal that they win it, they get the cruise, they do whatever, they have the
yeah.
party.
Yeah.
They don't know how to replicate it because they've not reflected.
Yeah.
And so I think in anything, it's like, what did I learn from that? And then sometimes I'm sure, Rob, you go,
Yeah.
please listen to me. See these scars? I've already sacrificed
Right.
on
Right.
making that mistake. Please don't go there again.
Right.
And those sometimes become really relevant to bring to the surface
Yeah.
because there's pain that has shaped your feeling on it. But I think learn from, when you said that, I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, we have to learn
Yeah.
from everything, including the good.
Yeah.
Like, what
Yeah.
is it that's made you successful, Rob?
Yeah.
Is it that's made me successful? And understand that so that we know how to develop it or replicate it or bring it out again when it's most needed.
Yeah. So speaking of that, I was kind of curious because I don't know if you and I have ever had this conversation about some key developmental moments for you early on in your career. And we know that one of the most important competency building that leaders have reported are things like what you just described. And sometimes those things occurred early career. And I was just curious, what is maybe one or two, maybe just one experience early in your career that affected your entire if you have something that affected your trajectory as a leader across your career and even today that you would say that was an important moment quite early on?
Um, okay. I think of the journey, and again, because I've been on it for a long time.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm in a later season of my leadership journey. And I think the profound things are the things that happen in family, right? That shape us. I had a grandmother that was very passionate about faith and devotion and really wanted to inspire those things in me. I had a father that had a military background. So it was accountability, leadership, represent, was ingrained. And then I had a mother who had the gift of hospitality and sacrificial caregiving.
Mm,
And so those things kind of really shaped. And even when you look at any kind of personality test, I mean, I can see where those personalities cultivated that for me. I think getting into the work, one of the things is, I had a spiritual transformation before I went into it. That was really critical in my life. And
mm,
it was deciding I didn't just like an idea of God, but I really wanted to follow God. And
Mhm.
the thing that was distinctive about that was I was going into a career that could be very
Mhm.
self-focused. It's a fashion career, right?
Mhm.
So you're going into that, and it would have been really easy to think about my ambition, how do I want to get ahead? But that changed it, and it gave me another focus. I believe that conversion saved me from how my own ambition would destroy me
Mhm.
and being self-focused. So when I went to work, I was really about what's going on today. Like, how do I bring my best to today? Not worrying about tomorrow, where before that time I would have said, okay, now what do I need to do? And like, what do I need to learn? And how can I get it? I mean, that was just how I was wired um, for a lot of my life, but it changed and it was other focused. And what happened was because I was being really conscientious about whatever someone gave me, people always saw things in me that I wasn't seeing in myself because I
Mhm.
was just trying to do the work.
Mhm.
And so my whole life has been a series of someone stretching me to say, I see this in you and you can do that.
Mhm.
And walking into, we were talking about being consciously competent, saying, okay, and leaning into that, trusting that they had an instinct, that they saw that, and then walking into those experiences and feeling needy. So instead of walking and saying, hey, I'm the boss of this, or I got this nailed, it was like, no, I have to learn from everybody. Um, I mean, I remember going to Christian publishing, and while I'd had a lot of experience in the book business, I had 7 vice presidents that were brilliant and they'd been
Mhm.
publishing in all their lives. And, I just had to make a decision. You're the expert. I'm going to learn for you. So when the magazine calls, Publisher Weekly, and they're like, can you tell us about this? I'm like, you need to meet the expert.
Mhm.
And I would give them that center stage. And then I could learn from them that it wasn't a posture of, oh, I'm walking in, I'm the big boss and I know everything. It was like, no, you teach me. And I'll couple that with the experiences that I have, and let's just see how we can make a difference together. So that whole thing of having mentors that saw, and I was a willing learner. I think I've always been a lifelong learner. Like, teach me that. I'm not afraid of something. I'll learn something new. And I think people are attracted to that.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
but that was really, I think, it. And so it wasn't one mentor, it was a season of mentors. And my career was in that very turbulent time of mergers and acquisitions and huge disruption. I always felt like I was sitting in the center stage of, oh, I'm in an industry today that's going to completely flip upside down. Um, there were
Mhm.
great people along the way that had the simplest advice. My favorite one was in a time of great duress. Um, my mentor and boss at the time said, you know what? Everything we learned in kindergarten. So we're just going to hold hands and stick together.
Mm.
Huh.
We're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
And, I think about that often. And then he used to say that same thing, that like, don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. I mean, he had just had a perspective for
Interesting.
moving through change, which other would have, been incredibly painful and really break your spirit and
Yeah.
and maybe even your passion for the work that you love to do.
What does so when you think back on lots of those different moments, and you hear a lot of people talking about failure, like how important failure is, and it's sometimes it bothers me because the research on failure, it is a profound leadership development moment. So there's no doubt about that. The problem with the way people talk about it is that the experiences that people, according to that literature, the experiences that people have described as failures are things that they would never wish on their worst enemies. It's like these are moments that they would not want to repeat. And it's like, so the failures were not fun. You know what I'm saying? There was
No,
these are
they're not
these are
fun.
there are actually times where sometimes you feel like you are almost destroyed. You are alone. This is just what the research said. And having been through failures myself, these are places where you're like, I don't know the path forward right now. Like that's the level of failure that people were talking about when they also talked about deep leadership competence being built at the same time. And I'm curious at this point in your career, how do you perceive just the assumption that you have failed. Like,
Oh,
how do you perceive the failures in your life now that were so difficult at the time? But how do you think about them now that you would say to other people, like, at this part of my journey, this is the way I think about them?
well, one of the things I find is that those moments are painful when you're living them, but I am so grateful for them. I mean, I'll, I can give you a great example. So I'm a young executive. I'm one of the youngest women in a divisional vice president leadership role within Federated Department Stores. And so I get assigned to take a huge location and flip it, turn it around, do it. And that so much so that they say, and Tami, you pick who you want on your leadership team, which is, so I got to
Yeah.
knowing after working in many stores, knowing who would be my dream team. Like that's a gift. So we get in, it's rolling, it's great. The numbers are happening. And then all of a sudden, Federated and our service, everything that you would measure is good. Like we're turning this ship. And then Federated sends in this group to do customer service surveys on all the stores.
Hmm.
Okay, great.
Hmm.
Awesome. And so I get a call, and the call is that our store, because it was huge, one of the bigger ones, was shopped. Now, this is being shopped and evaluated on not even knowing what the standards are, not even knowing what the game is, but they've come in and not only has our division of Federated failed, but the 5 stores that would pick, I'm dead last.
Hmm.
So I get a call from the president, and he comes in with the head of HR, which is always just a creepy thing to have happen, right?
Yeah.
To
Uh-huh.
talk with the president,
Yep.
with the senior executive in HR, and they bring my entire senior team, my dream team in. And we're going through line by line those results. And it was one of these things,
Oh my
like
goodness.
constantly. And it was the most painful experience because my people are just dying. And you've got to realize that before that, we had kind of the highest scores in the whole division. But now we
Hmm.
are rock bottom. And so what happens is, we all take it. And then everyone's excused except me. And even the HR is excused. And then the president got in my face and in not such kind language said, if you don't figure it out, I'm going to find someone who can.
Hmm.
Because we knew this survey thing was coming back again. And I
Hmm.
remember almost being shaken to the core because that was a huge, I mean, it was like a black eye in the whole division. You're an example, the wrong kind. And then my boss, the same one that said, hold hands and stick together, he came in, and because we were doing a lot of things, I was on a lot of committees. I was having input and overseeing a lot of things. And he said, we're stripping it all away.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's only one thing you're going to do, and you're going to fix this problem. So
Hmm.
praise God for focus. Now, I knew that I couldn't. I mean, when you've got like 400,000 square feet of possibility and space for interactions to take place with customers, but pulling my team into that. And we really said, we know we're better than this, and what are we going to do? And so they came up with the plan, and we created this whole system of how we were going to be involved and how we had great coverage in the store. And then I get the call that says, guess what? We're back at the top, and you're number 1.
Hmm.
And there's something really kind of scary about that,
Yeah.
because when you're at number 1, then the next time, where are you going to fall? Like, how do you maintain it?
Yeah.
In
You have a
fact,
new
they loved
problem.
what the team created, that they started to replicate it.
Uh-huh.
Like
Uh-huh.
it became standard operating procedures for great customer service. And I
Uh,
remember sitting there, and then all of a sudden I got to do things again. And I remember saying to my team, we got here not because of me. We got here because we put this together, and you were instrumental in it. Now, they're going to say we did it because they made me sit here. But now they're releasing me to go back. And the next time this goes around, it's going to be you, not it's going to be, well, it was only because Tami was there.
hmm. Hmm.
And you and I know that's not true.
Yeah. Hmm.
So we need to think, how are we going to rise up and come back and repeat?
Hmm.
And it was this intense failure that just inspired so much within them. And they came back and they did it again.
Wow.
And then
Hmm.
praise God, they stopped doing those things. But you see, it's that, oh my goodness, in the face. I mean, I never had anybody address me that way, alone
Yeah.
in a room and just saying, I mean, like really threatening your job over a customer service shopping score when you had all this. I mean, to me, it was so irrational, but a huge point of pride and whatever there. And that, the things that we learned through that, or I learned through that, I know have been repeated over and over again in my life.
Huh. Hmm.
I mean, where you go
Yeah.
back to it and you just say, I know what it is. And I'm grateful, because if I hadn't learned that failure moment there, I think I would have been a different leader in when we went to war with Iraq and I'm leading borders and the whole world falls apart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you say, how do I do something that's so completely out of my control? That felt out of my control, but that's like really out of control. But really, how do you mobilize people to say, I don't have the answers, but I know what we can do here. So what are we going to do here? And let's control what we can control and let's make a difference. And we had a conference when I was at Borders, which everyone said, why are you doing that? We have no money to do that. It's crazy to bring all your people together. And all I could think of is we need to hold hands and stick together.
Yeah.
And we brought them together and we talked about the things that we could do. And Jim Collins was our guest speaker for that
Huh.
conference.
Yeah.
And he talked about the difference will be what happens when people do come back to the store to buy. What will
Mm.
they experience that will be so radically different that they'll go, how did this happen in the midst of all of this? And how could you create it? And then we had Mike Abersham, who had the lousiest ship in the Navy, and he completely turned it around and he spoke. And I was like, oh, what a gift that we're having these speakers at this moment of time. But again, that rising up that says, you know what, within us, we can fight for this. There
Yeah.
are things that we can do. And I think about that even in my faith walk.
Yeah.
A lot of things that I have to just say, I can do what I can do. And then I have to trust, that God's going to take care of the rest. And it happens all the time. So the ability to rebound from failure and realize that you do not need to be a victim of it. And when you look in the mirror and you say, what is it about my leadership that caused this outcome? And you do a deep evaluation of it, you will come up with lots of things.
Hmm. So this is
Good and bad.
so what, speaking of, um, what a journey you just described of a couple of specific stories and pieces of that puzzle of your development. Um, what does trust have to do with that, of those experiences? And whether it's the trust, that you needed to feel within yourself, or your trustworthiness, or your trust between team members, or even your trust in that senior leader or the organization, what it's doing. I know that's a big question, but I'm kind of curious about what role has trust played in those moments?
Well, I believe people that could see more than me than I could see in myself, or that I was thinking about myself, was because it's being faithful to doing what you've been asked to do and what you commit to do. The
Hmm.
power of our word, nobody can take our word. So I think when you are faithful and you follow through with the things that matter, you are really starting to build trust. So, and
Hmm.
building trust allows others to come and entrust you with more
Hmm.
significant responsibilities. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a timeless principle, but I think that's it. And then I also think that when you're cultivating trust, a lot of it is understanding what you value, understanding what others value, and being the kind of leader that can meet people in the middle on that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So, um, and all of that happens, and all of that's tested. Trust is always tested in crisis.
Yeah.
It just is. You know,
Yeah.
who am I going to follow? But I think when you see someone doing something well, then you are more inclined to say, I want to give you more.
Huh.
And then as you give credit away to people for the things that they do, that also establishes trust. So when you make a point to acknowledge the others that have really carried that load and that it's not about you. There's just multiple opportunities, I think, in the cultivation of trust that's everywhere in our everyday life. But I also think our word, when you give your word to something, when you say, I'm going to do this,
Yeah.
and when you fail, to be able to say, that's on me.
Okay.
Building trust in your business starts with being able to measure it so that you can create a pathway for change. Our Wild Trust Index measures the drivers of trust at the personal, team, and organizational levels. We are building the largest database on the drivers of trust inside of organizations. This survey will inform growth imperatives and the necessary organizational change needed to fuel that growth. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.
I love what you just described, and I'm given your experience as a former president of Borders, and then also what was an early partnership with Amazon, which I know people may not understand that history. Can you speak to what trust had to or has to do with revitalizing an organization and leading a team with health and toward performance and well-being through a massive kind of moment like that, a transitional moment like that? Like, what was going on then? You touched on it a bit, but
Well, Borders had a very well-defined succession plan. So I knew a year before I was stepping into that position that I was going into that position. And they definitely tried to round out my experience and anything they thought I was lacking in that year, probably the hardest year of my life.
hmm,
And I remember that day happening, and there was this, oh, by the way, because this was in 2000, and so we're right in the height of the dot-com boom.
hmm, hmm,
And Amazon was an irritation like no other to me because they were in their guerrilla marketing. Like I would go into Border stores and there would be like flyers in there for Amazon. Or they pick their vans and they pant them and they put them outside in front of our bookstores. I mean,
hmm,
they were brilliant in that. But so they were advanced. It was a dot-com boom, and we separated out borders.com as something that was just a separate entity. So it would not be a distraction. So that little thing wouldn't distract, a chain of over 400 stores. And they said, oh, and by the way, now we want to bring this back to you
hmm,
because it really needs to be under the brand Unmiller. And I was like, well, the
hmm,
first thing I thought of was at that time not feeling overly tech savvy. And I said, well, before you do that, I just want to make it perfectly clear. I don't know how to load my own floppy disks. Just being transparent. They said, Tammy, we'll get 1,000 people to load your floppy disk. We just need you to think strategically about it. So at that time, it was generating $17 million in revenue and losing 28 million.
hmm.
And at this point in time, Amazon was already into one click and really hard to replicate and keep up with that. I mean, and now we're all primed, right? But they were into the one click. And so we worked with it. It's like, okay, how can we improve that? And we made some minor improvements. We reduced some of the loss. But it was also a time where everybody was thinking about bricks and clicks, right? People were talking about that. What's your online presence? How you're doing it? And then Forrester Research did this whole thing about the weakest link and that your brand really may not immediately, but it will fall to the lowest, weakest link. And we were the weakest link. And it really was the conversation that said, okay, we're never going to catch up with that. And we're never going to invest the dollars to catch up with that. So how do we partner with that? And how do you create a win-win scenario? And Amazon really hadn't done that. They were kind of their own beast and primarily in books. And now we're a book thing
Mhm.
saying, hey, we just want to join this. But the principle of that was let Amazon manage the center stage of the website and we would retain all the boutiques around it. So you
Mm,
pull it up and it'd say powered by Amazon. And at the time, which was really a miracle and amazing, is we had call centers and Amazon was willing to follow our script for customer service. So when it came in, but then we took the play because they also were sucking into all of our inventory in all of our stores.
Huh.
So we built these things called title sleuths. And we had done other research that said people are highly satisfied if they can come in and at least leave with what they came in for or the promise of it coming.
Huh.
And so people could go on a title sleuth and they could say, oh, that's in another local border store, I'm going to get it, or I can just order it now online. And then we would even have them shipped to the store if people didn't trust that. And they could come into the store and we would have their online orders waiting for them. I mean, oh, it just sounds so backwards now,
It's
right?
so funny, right?
So
Yeah.
backwards. I know.
I
But
lived this. We all lived
the
it,
thing
right? Or
was,
all of us.
and I will tell you this, I don't think in the history of borders, and I don't know that I could probably say in most organizations, that integration and that IT work that was done on time and under budget.
Hmm.
I mean, no IT. I never met an IT project that wasn't a whole lot more complicated than you thought
Yeah.
it would be. And so there was great celebration. And then, you know, what it did is it freed us up in that we were leaning into their expertise. And for the customers, it was a win. Oh, gee, I can come into the store, I can go online, here's where it is. And oh, I can use one click and it makes sense. And so we were offering the best that Amazon had to offer and then coupling it with our in-store experiences that
Hmm.
mattered most. And Amazon benefited because, you know, they're getting those sales through there. But yet we're getting all of the email addresses through the boutiques and the letter that we had different newsletters for different genres that people could sign up for. And it made sense. It was like saying we can trust this because they do what they do best and we'll do what we can do best. And together we can create a great experience and not fall
Wow.
behind. And
Wow.
we could have never caught up. There's no way we could have ever caught up on that. And then you know what that did for Amazon? It gave Amazon a model.
Right. Yeah.
And look at them today. I
And look at
mean,
them
you know,
today. I was thinking the same thing.
so I imagine us, and then I think they had Target, they had some other people that came on board. And then all of a sudden, you know, that just enlarges what Bezos thinks is possible, right? I mean, and he can just go crazy on his. And, you know, that was a gift we could go both way. I think when
Mhm.
you're working in trust, the times that you can find the win-win-win,
Yeah.
those are the sweetest times. But you have
Yeah.
to trust who you're willing to partner with and
And take a risk,
work
right?
with. Yeah,
Also. Yeah.
yeah. That we're
Yeah.
in it together, that I'm for you and you're for me, and I've got
Right.
your back, and let's figure this out
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, that's I think it's a lot of our listeners. I'm thinking of all these CEOs who will be listening to that thinking, okay, if I were to say, where am I today? Where I'll look back, we'd look back 20 years from now. Can you imagine that that's where this innovation or this partnership started and what trust plays in that? Like trusting my gut about, do I trust this person or not? There's all this person, right? Literally these leaders getting together and saying, are we going to do this together? And connect technologies or processes. All of that is so powerful. One of the things, Tammy, that listening to you, um, I don't know, you're such a dear friend, and but I also am so grateful for the way that you've invited me into the CLA platform and had an opportunity, and you bring so many incredible people who with different expertise to speak into your community. And one of the things I listen to is I wonder how often they get to hear from you. So I hope people hear this because you have so much wisdom. I want to put you on the stage and just hear these stories that have so many just nuggets of wisdom that people will learn from. And so this leads to my next question is, one of the things I know you have a deep heart for the legacy of leaders. And that like the CLA blog, the higher thinking blog it's I think it's one of the top 15 in the nation. Like it's got an incredible audience. And I'm
Well,
so
it's
curious.
we use a metric called FeedSpot, and we launched it in 2013. CLA didn't have a blog, and you know they were pretty popular then. And then you know we found ourselves. So we're badged at the top 100. I think the highest we've ever been is 3. And then we're usually, up there.
Incredible.
I don't obsess about it. I'm not
Yeah.
checking it every day. I kind of like dial in and I'm like, oh, that's kind of a surprise and delight. That's nice to see that we're there. And then every once in a while, they'll send a notice that says, oh, by the way, you're in the top 75 on philanthropy. And I remember looking at that list and we were the only Christian organization for philanthropy on that list. And I don't even
Uh,
think of us as, I mean, it's part of what we do. It's not, we have 8 other disciplines that we're focused on. So it's good to see that, but the blog has been an incredible learning lesson. It's like a grit to it.
yeah.
I think that has been honored in such a way. First of all, it's not me, it's the contributors. I'll be very clear about that.
Mm,
We get to aggregate amazing content, amazing thought leadership. And then when it comes to us, it's like, now we're entrusted. So what do we do? And we spend a lot of time on the back end saying, we got to get the readability as best we can. And we want to make sure that the SEO
yeah.
is ready to fly. So it
Yeah.
really is saying we're going to submit to what search engines love, because the messages that our contributors entrust to us are worthy of getting to as many people as possible. And that's
Mm,
always our posture.
yeah.
So the blog has been, incredibly successful. And it was interesting. I just connected with Reggie McNeil,
Mm,
who's done a whole lot in the kingdom thing. And I said, you've got all those books on the shelf. You've got all this stuff in your mind. Maybe it's time to spill out again. And, he was immediately picked up on the Feed Spot network. And so it was like
mm,
blown out to like millions more people
yeah.
by doing that. And I'm like, that's not bad for a first run.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see that. And I am honored always that people would entrust us
Yeah.
with their wisdom and be able to broadcast it out. And it's a wide variety of things. And trust is in there a lot, Rob. I
Yeah.
mean, we get a
Yeah.
lot of articles on trust and what does it take to build it and different perspectives on it. And but I would say we publish 3 times a week, and I think 2 of them are like were written just for me. I'll just be
Yeah.
candid. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I needed that. I sure
Yeah.
needed that. Even to the
You
point
know,
of repentance
it's
sometimes.
funny, Tammy, because it's one of the few blogs I read, quite frankly, and I also straight out blogs. And then what's funny is being a contributor, I have found it, I don't know if others have told you this, but it is when you said it's like it feels like it's written for you, I feel like for some reason, the way it's constructed, I feel like I'm writing even content for me. So it's
Yes,
interesting. It's
yes.
actually fairly therapeutic and meditative for me to actually be able to contribute. There's something about the nature of it that is pretty profound.
Well, and that passion comes through. People see that.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
feel like they're having conversations with our authors. Now, some of our blogs
yeah,
will be really more technical about
yeah.
things,
Of course.
operational
Yeah,
things that people need to know. But there is, I think there's a deep quality about the human experience, human beings being human,
yes, yes,
in the blogs that we receive, and people talk and share from the crucible of leadership.
yeah. That's right. That's right. I have a couple more questions, and I know Sabbath has a final question as well. Um, but one of the questions is, uh, in our research, there, trust we describe it as trust is more than a feeling. In fact, it's like that Boston song. We could sing it right
Yeah.
now. But that trust is more than a feeling, and it actually surprises some of the senior leaders that we work with. I had one recently who said it never occurred to me that I could measure trust. And it is a feeling. It's something that we feel, but if we leave it there, we don't actually get at what I would describe as its chemistry. Like the trust
Mm,
has a chemistry.
good.
It has a chemical makeup. It has certain variables that contribute to it. When they're present, it's there, and when they're not, it's not there. But it's not one chemical. It has these different pieces, and we're discovering this in some of the research that we'll be publishing in early next year. And one of the key variables that has emerged is the extent to which people are telling people each other the truth. And it's about certain things. So it's not just the truth about anything, but we could get into that later. But the extent to which people are able to be honest with one another. And so the flip side of that, and I actually had an interesting conversation with my brother about this as well, um, is that people have secrets. And the challenge with secrets is that, when there are too many secrets, trust breaks down because eventually we kind of know that they're there. And as I've worked with, we've worked with leaders over and over again, there are certain things that leaders cannot say. There are secrets they must keep, which creates an interesting trust challenge. Like, this is the thing I would hope people who want to blame leaders would realize is there are things that senior leaders legally can't share. And we have, if we're going to do whole leader development, we have to be honest about what leadership's about. And part of it is you hold solidarity, or, with a person, maybe something about them that you're not going to share, that other people might make assumptions about what you know, or you actually hold legal kinds of things that you legally can't share about your employees or about things going on in the business that are still getting worked out, those kinds of pieces. And I was curious, we were mentioning the blog, and there's so many voices that you hear, Tami. I just know all the people that are connected to you. This is a big question, but what's the greatest secret that most CEOs have, without outing anybody, to protect the innocent? Like, what would you say is one of the greatest secrets that they have?
Secrets. I think, well, I don't know if it's like a secret, but I think, a CEO at any level has big responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
There
Mm-hmm.
and it really it's focused on the sustainability of the organization, right? Because as an organization grows, you have lots of employees, you're caring for their health, their well-being, that you're part of this economic chain that allows them to also sustain their lives and things like that. And I think most leaders will often encounter that moment in time when they're faced with something that they truly don't have the answers
Mm.
for. And it's maybe that deep feeling of it's a recognition that I don't know if I'm good enough to do this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I have what it takes to see it through. And it's also a place where, in that vulnerability, leaders will let fear in.
Mm-hmm.
And fear can be very, very destructive.
Yes.
Um, Fear, the counter to that is humility.
Mm-hmm.
So again, in that point when everybody's looking at you and expecting you to have the answer, it's the humility to say, I don't know, but let's figure it out together.
Yeah.
And sometimes you feel like, well, you've got to have the answer.
Yeah.
And you feel weak, and it's getting to that humble place. But we talked about, I mentioned Jim Collins earlier. I mean, he did that whole like level 5 leadership, and it's humility and confidence and everything
Yeah.
that we studied. And I think that that's true.
Yeah.
And I think the humility comes when you can say, I don't have any idea. And the confidence is, but I know that we're capable of figuring this out. We can give it our best. So it goes back to the other conversation.
Huh.
How do I show up and I just bring my best? And this is what I know to be true. This is what I've experienced. And the collection of that is good. It's like, then you start sharing and sharpening, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
each other on that. And,
Huh.
when you have that thing of trust, then you talk about it, then you can handle conflict better.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I think for a leader to be in a posture of being able to open their heart and receive feedback is really important.
Yeah.
And seek to understand, because a lot of times, leaders will do things that's not their intention. And it's really frustrating when you have an intention and it doesn't line up with someone's perception, and you have to reconcile that. But if there is some layer of trust there, then you can have the conflict, and it's healthy, and it's in the public square, and you're problem solving and you're working on things and you can get through it. But I don't know. I mean, and I
Uh-huh.
don't want to project what I sometimes feel, but you get in that thing and just think, do I have what it takes to do this job? Can I
Yeah.
really do this? And you feel the weight, the mantle of leadership,
Yeah.
you
I
know.
was floating on the Frio River down at Lady Lodge. I don't know if you've been there in Texas. And I was with a friend of mine who just speaks prophetic things into my life. And he said, this was years ago. He said, Rob, you're about the things that people whisper out loud that scream out inside of them. And it was interesting because you think about that concept of secrets, and I love what you just described, Tammy, that I hope our audience would hear. There is a tremendous paradox. There's a necessary acceptance of paradoxes in leadership. That is the real story. If we're going to tell the whole story of leaders and the whole story of trust, we have to understand that we don't like it when people express hesitance or reluctance or a possibility that they don't have the answer. Sometimes we don't want it from our leaders. Like we won't even accept them or enter them into the role, which is unfortunate because when they express that humility and that vulnerability, and I think that you're right. I've heard that out loud with leadership team before, where one of the vice presidents will say, "I don't feel, if I'm getting honest, I'm not sure I have the competence to do my job tomorrow."
Yes.
And I've seen a CEO try to just completely erase that statement in real time.
Yeah.
Everyone in this room is competent, and and the reality is that the people that we really want to have lead us bring that conviction, but also that willingness to say, like, the real story is deep inside. I don't know. And when we've seen this, Tammy, where people begin to share that level of awareness and get more specific about where they do feel a lack of competence or skill or knowledge, and where they don't, trust grows. If they're able to get specific about, as opposed to a general, I just don't feel competent, like where are the specific areas? Now we kind of know where we could fill in the blanks. So I so appreciate that. I have one, I
And
want to,
I feel like I would be remiss though if I didn't add to this,
yeah,
Rob, that this is where my value and belief system is a distinct advantage for me.
yeah,
In fact, um, I would call it the adventure part of my faith journey, where you are about to say yes to something. Maybe it's a position, it's the assignment, and you don't know what's going to be required, but you have the faith to jump because you know that really you're not alone.
uh,
And you have the confidence in a higher control over the consequences of life, that whatever the outcome is, you can rest, and that it is as it should be.
yeah,
So that you could go through that moment of crisis and say, it's still going to be well with my soul. And I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump. I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to do it. And I know it won't be me. And I will tell you, in all of even the situations back and forth, there were times where I was like, I'm spent. I have no idea. I just need to know the next step.
mm,
And that's where the faith element, so it's a little different kind
yeah,
of advantage,
I
I think, that
understand.
I would have. And when I think about it, and just the ability to make a decision like that before I even went into business, that it would be very difficult for me to try to predict or look back on it and say how radically different the outcomes would have been without that in my wiring.
Yeah,
And so I can't speak to business leaders that are listening, like if you aren't grounded in something like that, what that
yeah,
looks like. But I know that and those moments force you to greater dependency,
yep,
because you recognize you have to recognize your neediness. So it's like gathering the best thinking for your team, but also surrendering it to a higher power that
yeah,
knows it better than you could ever know it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That is a powerful statement, and that is the place to finish this conversation that I know will keep going.
Yami, thank you for your wisdom and vulnerability and your journey shared with us today. There's so much more story to be told, and we look forward to that As we wrap up our time together, I do have one last wild question. We love to ask our guests at the end of our time together. Are you in a season of accepting yourself or changing yourself?
Um, I believe I don't know that I'm wired to ever be in a thing where I just don't know that there's more that I can learn, or and maybe the things that I'm interested in, the things that I'm learning, that continues to evolve. But I think I mentioned it before, but I always want to be in that place of being a lifelong learner. And I love adapting and learning how to be more effective and do things different. So I would say I'm not wired to just sit and be wholly content with where I am. I just know, I always just say, I'm under construction and waiting for the utter relief of holiness. There's just so much more building and growing to do. And I just think that's just important in the life journey. So no, I don't think I'm kicked back at all. I
Yeah.
just,
That's so good, Tammy. As
Wow,
Sabbath's
thank
going to
you.
ask you how our audience can connect with you, and your organization. One thing I want to give is just a shout out to, I know that you come up in the new year and the Outcomes Conference is coming, which is one moment for CLA that's important. Having participated in the conference several times over the years, I would say I would encourage people to look there, especially if you're isolating alone and you feel a sense of you're leading alone, and whether you're a nonprofit leader or a business leader, and you're looking for a faith-forward community of people who are making incredible sacrifices to achieve the missions that they're on, to get resourced, is to take a closer look at the Outcomes Conference, not just that, but the broader CLA community. So Sab, now ask your question.
Yeah. How can the people listening or watching find you? How do they connect with you? What is the best way for them to connect with you personally in your leadership journey and the work that you're doing at CLA?
well, I would say, and I'm on LinkedIn, so, it's always good to find people on LinkedIn. I always love the conversations that take place there. You can visit Christian Leadership Alliance at christianleadershipalliance.org. Although I'll let you in a little secret, we're about ready to do a big brand explosion. But the URL won't change. But it won't look like your grandfather's CLA, I think. So we've got some fun changes there that I'm looking forward to. And there it's easy to find out about, the Outcomes Conference and the other resources. We have a center for online learning, and we do 10-week cohorts over different topics. And so we connect community that way. I love this community and the way that they give so freely to each other.
Hmm.
Um, it's a very life-giving experience to be with the people that are in there. And, they're all in. We did a qualitative, quantitative study on our membership, and it said, these are all in leaders.
Hmm.
Mm,
I love that because they bring their best. And anyone that comes to the Outcomes Conference, you're going to learn a lot, but you're going to be expected to bring your best too.
Yeah.
Everybody has thoughts and ideas and experiences that contribute. I mean, often my pastor always says, the gospel came to you on the way to someone else. And I'm like, and so do our experiences.
Hmm.
And
Right.
we
Right.
need to release those experiences into the lives of others, because we might have the answer, we might have the hand that can take them right through that spot. And that's the beauty of community and
Yeah.
being an alliance community. So thank you for that shout out. But
Yeah.
christianleadershipalliance.org, and your journey can start there.
Thank you for listening to this Wild Conversation podcast. For more information, visit wildleaders.org, click on the Wild Trust platform, and get started with the Wild Trust Index today.